It appears there's a massive animal in the lake. Well, could it be? No way. A polar bear was just spotted swimming in the middle of Lake Michigan, and believe it or not, it's not the first time this has happened. In this amazing video, we will see what happens when a polar bear gets into Lake Michigan. Keep watching for the incredible moment a polar bear decided to take a massive splash in the water. It was an unbelievable sight to see. This bear had made its way into the lake and seemed to be enjoying itself immensely. But the moment we've all been waiting for is when the polar bear takes a big plunge into the water. The crowd gathered around the lake couldn't believe their eyes. No one had ever seen a polar bear swimming in Lake Michigan before. The polar bear swam with ease through the water, its white fur glistening in the sunlight. It looked like a giant in the water, but it moved with such grace and power. It was truly a sight to behold. At first, no one was sure why the polar bear was in the lake. Polar bears are typically found in the Arctic regions, not in the middle of a lake in Michigan. It was a mystery, but it didn't last long. As the polar bear continued to swim around the lake, it became clear that it was enjoying itself immensely. It splashed around in the water, rolled around in the shallows, and even took a few dives. It was like a kid in a pool, full of energy and joy. The people gathered around the lake were in awe of the polar bear. They had never seen anything like it before. Some people even said they felt like they were witnessing something magical. But the polar bear wasn't done yet. It was time for the main event, the moment we've all been waiting for, the polar bear taking a big splash in Lake Michigan. The crowd held their breath as the polar bear made its way to the edge of the lake. Then, in a flash, it jumped into the water. The splash was heard all around the lake, and people cheered with excitement. The polar bear had taken a big splash in Lake Michigan. It was an unbelievable sight to see, a polar bear swimming and splashing around in the middle of a lake in Michigan. It was a moment that no one would forget. The polar bear seemed to revel in the attention. It kept taking big splashes and dives, much to the delight of the crowd. It was like the polar bear was putting on a show just for them. But the moment came when the polar bear decided to take its biggest splash yet. It took a deep breath, reared back, and then dove into the water. The splash was massive, sending water flying everywhere. For a moment, the only sound that could be heard was the gasps and cheers of the crowd. Then, as quickly as it had dived, the polar bear resurfaced. It shook itself off and swam to a nearby shore. The crowd erupted in applause. They had witnessed something truly special, a polar bear taking a big splash in Lake Michigan. As the polar bear made its way to shore, it seemed to be basking in the attention. It had put on a show for the crowd, and they had loved every minute of it. The people around the lake were in awe of the polar bear's strength and agility. It had moved with such grace and power through the water, and its dives had been nothing short of spectacular. But the polar bear wasn't the only one enjoying itself. The people gathered around the lake were having a blast, too. They had never seen anything like this before, and they weren't sure if they ever would again. Some people even said they felt like they were part of something magical, a moment in time that they would never forget. As the afternoon wore on, the polar bear continued to play in the lake. It took more dives, made more splashes, and generally had a great time. The crowd watched in awe as the polar bear continued to put on a show. It was like the polar bear was determined to make this day one that no one would forget. As the sun began to set, the polar bear finally decided to head back to shore. It had had a great time playing in the lake, but it was time to rest. The people gathered around the lake watched as the polar bear made its way back to shore. They knew that this was the end of the show, but they were grateful for the memories they had made. They had witnessed something truly special, a polar bear taking a big splash in Lake Michigan. As the polar bear disappeared into the trees, the people around the lake began to disperse. They had had a great time, but it was time to go home. As they made their way to their cars, they couldn't stop talking about what they had seen. They had witnessed something truly special, a polar bear taking a big splash in Lake Michigan. It was a moment that no one would forget, and a memory that they would cherish forever. From that day forward, the story of the polar bear that took a big splash in Lake Michigan became local legend. People from all around the area came to the lake to see if they could spot the polar bear, but it was never seen again. Some people said they believed the polar bear had returned to its home in the Arctic, while others said they thought the polar bear had simply moved on to a new adventure. No one knows for sure what happened to the polar bear, but one thing is certain. The moment it took a big splash in Lake Michigan will never be forgotten. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe for more updates. Thank you for watching.